In today's video, we're looking at camera brands, not camera models, well, kind of camera models, but also the brand and how to choose which brand you should go for. Because I think people are missing a really important element to this, and we'll get to that towards the end. But camera brands are not as important as you think. Let me just start off with that. Whatever brand you have, it is fine. There's no difference really between a Canon, Sony, or Nikon, whichever way it's pronounced. Likewise between the Hasselblad and the Phase One. They're very similar. They both have pros and cons, but really at the end of the day, you're getting a great image regardless. So for years, people have been recommending that you go down to a camera shop and you try one in your hands to see if you like the feeling of it. And this kind of makes sense from a very logical point of view. It's like, yes, you should feel comfortable with your camera. But I didn't feel comfortable with the Canon 5D when I first got one. And it was a long time before I did, because you just get used to it. Whatever car you drive, if you buy a new car, it feels different. And then you get used to it. You put some new shoes on, they don't feel the same as the old ones. And then you get used to them or break them in. It's the same with cameras. You get used to them. Whatever it is, you will get used to it. So I think this whole making sure it fits in your hand nicely and you understand the controls well is really overrated compared to other things. And one of the two big things you should really consider is lens choices. And this might sound really obvious, but the reason I went with Canon at the time is because they had a great lineup of tilt-shift lenses compared to other brands. Now, Hasselblad have a tilt-shift adapter, but at the time, obviously, Hasselblad was well out of my price range. Phase One offer 2 tilt-shift lenses, and again, well out of my price range. So it was the Canon 5D Mark I, a 90mm tilt-shift and a 40 or 45mm tilt-shift. That was my option because the Nikon equivalents were not as good at the time, and that's why I chose that. But what I didn't do is perhaps what the most important thing is, and that is to look at the files. And I'm not talking about which one creates the sharpest or has the most dynamic range, because although this has some bearing and DxO scores are somewhat interesting, what's more important, and this is really the crux of how you should choose the brand or model of camera you go for, is how well you can grade that raw file. And this is something I don't see people talking about enough. The reason I shoot on Phase One and not Hasselblad and big productions is because I find it much easier to grade a Phase One back file than a Hasselblad back file, especially considering Capture One is literally built for Phase One backs. It is beautiful to grade. The reason I shoot Canon over Nikon or Sony is because I find it easier to grade these files. That doesn't mean they're easier files to grade. It just means the way that my brain logically works means that I find it easier to grade these. So if I was looking for a new camera brand, whatever it may be, what I would do is I'd go into a shop, take a memory card with me, and I'd shoot a raw file from each of them and try and grade them and see which one you can get the best results from. Because a DxO score is great in telling you how much latitude there is, but if that doesn't compute your brain in terms of how you grade and how you like to adjust the files, it's meaningless. Yesterday's video was shot on a point-and-shoot camera. I'm not sure how many people saw that, but it was a point-and-shoot camera rather than this. This is a big 6K raw, over-the-top YouTube camera. This camera here is beautiful to grade. The reason I chose this camera for video, as well as the resolution for when I run workshops so I can do punch-ins and stuff, is because of how easy it is to grade. That, and it has built-in audio stuff, which is really useful. So I don't have to use an external amp to... Anyway, that's boring. The camera I used yesterday, nightmare to grade, but the footage straight out of camera is good, and the camera is smaller than my very small hands. So, when looking for a camera, I would do the following. I'd first of all look at which one has a lens lineup which suits your needs. I wouldn't worry about which lens is sharpest, because we've often shot on big productions where we've had multiple setups, and we've had the 100mm L on one setup, we've had the Zeiss Milvus on another setup, the previous Zeiss Milvus Macro Planner on another setup, and no one can really tell the difference until they're pixel peeping, and once it's blown up on a billboard, no one knows the difference anyway. So I wouldn't look at the DxO scores on the lenses, I'd look at the range of lenses. Do they have a focal length that you like at a price point you can afford? Do they offer technical lenses that you want at a price point you can afford? Now, once you've done that and you've narrowed down the list and you've made sure you can afford the model in each brand, go to a camera shop and say, look, I want to try these cameras out. Here's my memory card. I want to take some raw files on each of them, go home, have a play with them, edit them, and then I'll come back and make my purchase. Or go to a rental house, rent one of each of the flagship cameras or whatever model it is you want. They normally do the best crop sensor, like the equivalent of a small studio camera like this, and then a sports camera. Rent those, have a real good play with them, different scenarios that you would use in work, because taking a shot in a camera store probably isn't that similar to the work you do. Grade those files and then go, right, which one did I find it easiest to go from raw file to my vision? Which one is easiest for me? Because that's what it really comes down to when it comes to choosing cameras. There are no bad cameras out there today. You cannot buy a dud. There's no camera that isn't good enough for commercial work. I mean, I still shoot on, what is this, 7 years old, 8 years old? These are the 5 DSRs. I have a bag of these. These are great workhorse cameras, and the way that Canon grades works for me. Doesn't work for everyone. Some people prefer to grade Nikon. That's fine. But intuitively, I think Canon in terms of grading, and other people intuitively think Nikon. I'm not sure if Nikon and Hasselblad have very similar raw files, because I find the two of those very tricky to grade. But the Canon and the Phase 1 for me is great, but that doesn't mean it will be for you. So go and have a play. Maybe we should look at building a bank of raw files from different cameras. Maybe we can come up with some standardized shots or something so people can play with those files. That'd be really useful, wouldn't it, actually? Let me think about that. I'll see if I can come up with a way to make that happen. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. See you all soon. Bye-bye.